Today on the news and why it matters, ICE offices hit with a wave of violence, threats against their children. Got a lot to get into with that, and the latest poll numbers in the Democrat primary may surprise you guys. It's going to be a fun conversation. A lot coming up. It starts right now. Welcome to the news and why it matters. I am Sarah Gonzalez, joined by Glenn Beck, Stubergear, and Jason Howerton. Thanks for being here, gentlemen. Before we get into the show, I want to thank our sponsor, American Financing.
American Financing is a company that I trust. I've trusted them for a long time. They do not work for the banks. They are an independent, family-owned and operated institution that can cover you coast to coast. And they work with all the banks, but they don't work for the banks. They work for you. So many times these mortgage companies, they will get kickbacks from the bank. Hey, we're offering this special deal. You get people to buy into this loan and we'll give you an extra 10 grand or whatever it is. They don't do that. That's why they're different. They don't jam you into a loan that isn't right for you. They listen to you, and they've actually turned people down. They've turned Stu down for a crazy idea that he had. But I know for a fact that if you're in an iffy territory, they just are like, you shouldn't take this loan out. And they won't do it because they're fiscally responsible for you. They're looking out for you. It's American Financing. Call them at the number at the bottom of the screen, 800-906-2440 or americanfinancing.net.
So threats against ICE they're escalating at this point.
Yet you wouldn't know it if you were watching the media.
You wouldn't. It's nowhere. It's nowhere. But we'll hear about what Donald Trump tweets, I'm sure, on CNN.
Yes.
Not so much that ICE offices and even private companies who are contracted by ICE are being targeted. There was a shooting early yesterday at, San Antonio, the San Antonio ICE office. Mm-hmm. And the day before that, there were protesters, and they were actually out targeting specific people who worked in this GEO group, who's the private contractor. They were talking about their children's names. They were talking about where they went to church, where they went to school. Let's watch.
We know that children you have in a cage. Throughout the country, John Bolfin, you have kids in you have kids in. We know everything about you, and you won't just be seeing us here.
We know where you sleep at night. We know what kind of dog food you buy your dogs.
We're not actually joking. John Bolfin, you go to church and you live on road. We're not joking.
Glenn, 2019, kind of insane.
Mm-hmm. It's remarkable, and yet not, that the media doesn't cover did we catch? I think we caught the guy who firebombed ICE a couple of weeks ago, right?
He gets killed, right?
Was he killed?
Okay. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Listen to this.
We don't know, and we're in the media.
Right.
We're in the media, and we're like, I can't really remember, because we were probably the only people that covered it. Mm-hmm. You know, in mainstream, nobody is covering these things. Now, you have a shooting yesterday. We didn't even really know about it. That wasn't everywhere. Why is that? You have Ocasio-Cortez and others saying they need to disband ICE, we need to destroy ICE, calling them out and saying go after them, not like targeting a district.
She's calling them Nazis and saying they're running concentration camps. It's a little more than just these guys are not good people.
Right. And now they are out and they are doxing people and their children. Wait a minute, what was it yesterday? We were talking about somebody in television that didn't like it, that somebody approached them while he had his children.
Fredo.
What?
Oh my God, wait,
yeah.
Can we bleep that?
Yeah. Notice this is what they're doing. Where's Chris Cuomo on this one? Mm-hmm. This doesn't fit their narrative. And this is why you have conspiracy theories. This is why you have discord. This is why you have the lowest trust in the media of all time. Why? Because people know this is about politics. How are you going to run a country? How are you going to be a democracy, as they like to say, when people don't know the truth? You can't self-rule if you don't know what the truth is.
What boils my blood is we spent weeks on the narrative that words and rhetoric are dangerous, and Trump's rhetoric kills people. That's the news cycle we've been in for weeks. And then you have people who are out there saying it. We're not kidding. We know where you live. These are your kids. But that's not a big deal. That's not rhetoric that leads to shootings or that leads to bombings at ICE facilities. Like, I don't know how the hypocrisy could get any deeper, yet we're still in this mode where we kind of just sit back and take it, and CNN doesn't cover it, and we're the only ones talking about it.
So there was you remember it was Tulsi Gabbard, right? No, who was it that was shot?
You're thinking of
Gabby Giffords.
Gabby Giffords.
Gabby Giffords. So, sorry, Tulsi.
Yeah, sorry, Tulsi. Gabby Giffords was shot. I was sitting in a play in New York on Broadway, and I was handed a note in the middle of it. My wife was like, "Can you just enjoy?" And I'm handed a note, and it tells me what had just happened. And she just looked at me, and I said, "Our life may have just changed." And all that week, you remember, all that week, we were waiting to be fired because not we were connected. In fact, the shooter happened to be a liberal, a lefty, and a crazy man on top of that. But we were waiting to be fired for that. Do you think anybody who has talked about ICE, who has said anything about concentration camps, who have backed them up, who have said anything on the air at all about ICE, do you think they're waiting to be fired? Do you think they're waiting to get a stern talking to? No.
Maybe even a clearer example, because, look, the ICE thing thankfully didn't result in anyone dying in this particular case. It's still a serious thing and would be certainly brought up.
It's not for lack of trying.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Would be a lot more prominent if it had gone the other way politically. But I mean, the El Paso thing is, there could not be a more crystal clear example of this.
Well, before we leave ICE, there's another thing that's interesting that they're not covering. This was a shooting, not a firebomb, but a shooting. At a time when everyone's talking about gun control, they're not covering a shooting?
Yeah. Well,
now move on.
Well, it's such a great thing with the shooting if you're on the left, because if someone on the right does it, it's politics. If someone on the left does it, it's guns, right? So you always have a great argument to be able to assign blame to someone you don't like. But on the El Paso shooting, again, the manifesto, they just came out with a giant expose in the New York Times, which describes in detail all the times prominent right-wing people in talk radio, in politics, said the word invasion. I mean, it's incredible. Like, they went in incredible detail and manpower to make sure that they can make the case that anyone who said invasion is partially responsible for this El Paso shooting. The exact same document outlines all sorts of environmental claims which have been made by every Democratic presidential candidate and every left-wing website and every left-wing personality over and over and over again. How bad commercialism is, how bad capitalism is, how bad waste is, how bad over-harvesting our resources are. All of these random normal left-wing complaints, and much clearer language and much more detail than what he went into when it comes to the border. And he wrote it in the same document. He didn't say, here's my reason number one, and also the environment. He wrote them as equal parts of this. And they don't even acknowledge it in these stories.
And beyond that, and now I read this in Australia because I was in Australia and I haven't checked it up prior to the show, and I should have. But I believe the shooter had just broken up with his girlfriend, who was Mexican or Hispanic, one of the two. And he was disgruntled about that. I think this is what I read in the Australian paper, so it probably is more accurate than anything.
Probably, yeah.
But he had just broken up. So how can you say he was motivated by race if he was dating a Hispanic? Really?
It's a tough twist, and really we all know that they will do any twist, any gymnastics needed to blame what essentially boils down to Donald Trump, right? I mean, like, as much as a lot of this stuff gets blamed to the right, and that's always been the pattern here, but this is really, they're going crazy with it. I mean, the idea, because this goes back to targeting and the Gabby Giffords thing. We were there at that time, and they looked for anything that would tie any right-wing personality, and of course we went through it most directly then, any right-wing personality to any shooting. So I mean, if we, if you happen to be for lower taxes, and some guy who's a shooter says, "I think taxes are too high," well, that was the right wing fault. Now it's specific to Trump, in which they'll just go after him for anything. I mean, invasion and having border concerns is not some random new thing that's assigned to Donald Trump. Like is it a little bit new for a president to use language like that? Sure. Then that is, something notable. But the idea that it inspires shootings is completely irresponsible.
Here is what everyone is missing, and the reason why Donald Trump was elected on this issue. The average American living in the heartland, and I think probably big time now in LA and other places, they're seeing when they go to the hospital a huge line. When their kids want to wear a flag shirt, some kid who's here illegally has a problem. Their kids can't get into college or have to pay for college, and these kids get a much lower rate. More importantly, what they see is their job. They don't know if their job is stable. Look at the stock market today. How many of us are comfortable that, oh yeah, United States is very stable. The government and the economy is very stable. I'm not.
Down 800 points today?
Yeah. So you look today and you say, the average person, especially in the heartland, seeing their towns dry up and blow away, their jobs dry up and blow away, and then you see a whole party standing up and saying, no, we want more illegals. Come on in. Just open up the gates. The average person, that is terrifying, not because they're from Mexico, but because they feel like their job, their livelihood, their towns, everything they know is just being flushed down the toilet. They feel like, wait, isn't my life important?
Yeah. Jason, how responsible do you think the media is, not for individual actions, but just for the growing anger at Border Patrol, at ICE, at these people doing their jobs, enforcing the laws?
So I'm very careful to assign blame because I do not feel like, I feel like you can create an atmosphere that ratchets up the pressure, which is never good. I don't think the media is responsible, but I think with those protests out in the streets with people calling for their children's names would not be happening if they weren't meant to feel as if there was something they think in their heads that Nazis are taking children and starving them and making them sleep on the floor.
Yeah, Ocasio-Cortez is probably more at fault on this one.
Yeah.
Again, you can create the atmosphere, and she didn't do it, but when you are now talking, and she was just asked, are you sorry for that? I mean, you got a lot of heat for that. Are you sorry for that? No, I'm not. I mean, when you're convincing people that there are Nazis.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all agree that 0% of the blame should go to anyone other than the person who's actually doing it.
Right.
I mean,
for individual actions, absolutely.
We can go to this point of Jim Beam really creates an environment which creates drunk driving deaths. It's true at some level, right? But Jim Beam is 0% responsible. It's all about our individual responsibility when it comes to these things. Separately from that, though, these are really bad points. They do create political dysfunction for sure. I mean, look, a crazy person can do what a crazy person does. You don't always need a justification.
Or a trigger,
right, exactly. Like we always say this about terrorists. We're like, oh, well, we're giving them these reasons to bomb people. Well, they're going to find a reason to bomb people. They're terrorists, right? Like the guy who shot Gabby Giffords said grammar was the reason. He thought there was a real problem with our grammar system. I mean, how do you solve that one? You don't, right? But I do think that it does create a massive political dysfunction to the point of where people who have good intent are so misled by what the actual facts on the ground are, they can't solve what should be really easy equations and sensible conversations and things that we should be able to actually fix in the country. They can't be solved.
Basic things like, is ICE running detention camps?
Right.
This is basic. Why can't the media go fact check that and set the record straight? I just don't get why the news cycle is AOC gets to decide what's true, and then they report it. AOC says this is fact. And then, okay, well, where's the pushback?
Yeah. All right, the latest poll numbers in the Democratic primary when we come back. So mad I saw, of course, it was not on mainstream media. It was on, I think it was the Daily Caller. Stu, some rather shocking, might I say, poll numbers coming out from YouGov?
YouGov, yeah. YouGov in conjunction with The Economist. It's a decently rated pollster, not top of the line, and it does have some. There's a couple caveats with it. It was a very large sample. It was an online opt-in poll, not like a shady, like, the polls that we do at the end of the show.
What you're saying is it was not a scientific poll like we have.
Yeah, right. Yeah, kind of the reverse of what I'm saying, actually. It's amazing. So there are a little bit of caveats. I do think, like, at times you get more activists in polls like this that sort of would reflect some of these differences. Let me just give you the poll here. The top line is very strange. 21% for Joe Biden, which is the lowest you've seen him in a long time. 20% for Elizabeth Warren, 1 point behind. And then Bernie Sanders close behind as well with 16%.
But if it was activists, wouldn't you think that Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, I mean,
at least even if he was number 2.
I mean, look, this is a pretty decent. Him being behind by 5 is also a pretty big storyline here. So it could be. I mean, look, that's just a theory of mine. I don't have science to back that one up. But I do think that occasionally, when you're saying I would like to be polled, you're a certain type of person, an insane person, for example. But like I think a lot of times you'll get people who want to tell their opinion, and maybe they're a little bit more activist. Bottom line with that is this is only one poll. It's not reflective of all of them. It does show, though, maybe an exaggerated example of what's actually been happening in the other polls, which is Warren rising. I think people who are in that I want a socialist sort of camp are saying I've got a choice between Sanders and Warren, and honestly, I think it's Warren. And I find this to be fascinating because she just does not seem like the type of candidate that's going to do well against Donald Trump. Can you picture her on a debate stage with Donald Trump? It just seems like a terrible decision. We kind of got a preview of what that decision looks like with Hillary Clinton, right? Like she's sort of like Hillary Clinton with less charm, which is hard to pull off, frankly. It's not a good move for them. I think you can look at it and say, there is a lot of times through these campaigns where candidates have runs, right? Like, Buttigieg was up at 15 at one point, now he's down at more like 5. Harris was up at 17 at one point, now she's down at more like 8. Beto was up at 15, now he's down at 0. And this poll, I think he was at 3 or 5. No, he got to 5. This is, by the way, best poll in a while for Beto.
Making his run.
And you mean Bob Frank?
Bob Frank, sorry.
I thought after him trying to change that tire, he would be like in the negatives by now.
No, that helped him. Apparently the tire changing was a big deal.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you not find that to be authentic and genuine?
I did not.
Did you see him?
I did not.
I saw a video of him buying Kraft macaroni and cheese
Wow.
at the grocery store. He was there.
He's just like me.
I've
done
like
that.
me.
I've done that
exactly
before.
right.
Amazing. That's actually a really good poll for Beto right now. 5% is a massive poll. The other thing to look at this is there's a really important line between 1% and 2% right now. If you look at this graphic one more time, Tulsi, I think, is north of 2%. Yeah, she's at 2. Booker's at 2. Klobuchar being at 1, Yang being at 1, Castro being at 1. That doesn't qualify you for the next round of debates. You have to get to 2. So they need 4 qualifying polls. It's a long, sordid details, but like people like Castro are in trouble. Klobuchar's in serious trouble of missing these debates. And once you start missing debates, do you even bother showing up? Why not just cancel?
But you know what?
Gabbard's in trouble too on that one. She does not have the you have to get to donation level as well, which she probably will hit. But the polling is a problem for a lot of these candidates. I mean, you're going to see this field cut from 24, 25. Down to 11, maybe 12 that make this next round of debates. And that's another question. Do you dump a dozen people on one stage, or you break it up into 6 and 6? They're going to have to make all these decisions. But that, as you look at these polls as they come out, that 1 to 2% line is a really important line to look for.
Tulsi Gabbard just went off to serve for 2 weeks. Guarantee that's why she will not win. There's no way for her to win. Here's a woman who I actually I liked her more for that. I was like, oh, wow, good for you.
Totally.
She's got her priorities right. She serves the country. You're a Democrat?
Yeah.
You think you're going to be elected in the primary if you're part of the war machine for this evil country? I mean, think of the balls that took for her to do and not try to get out of. And I actually liked her for that.
Yeah.
Her views are super on the other side of this, right? Like she did go and fight in the military, and she has real credibility and served the country and done a hell of a lot more for it than I ever have. But she's also like, probably one of the furthest towards isolationism in the entire field. That's why she has some libertarian support, because her foreign policy views are pretty much on that line.
I think America's going there, though.
Yeah, I think so, and it certainly fits with the Democratic Party.
Right. This is the key that I think it shows how far off the mark the Democrats now are. You have somebody who's an isolationist. Well, we've been at war for almost 20 years now. I don't know. I'm for stopping these endless wars. I wasn't at that point in 2002. I'm there now. You got a lot of things going for you. She's serving in the military. That would have been something they would have highlighted.
Oh yeah.
She would have been, a fighter pilot, and you would have seen all of the stuff about her serving. Now they're hiding from it. It just shows how far left
they're picking abortion, late-term abortion. They're picking border stuff. They're picking all the stuff that like America as a whole is kind of on the same page about. I mean, there's a few like standard things that we all agree on, and they're like, let's be against those things. And so I think it's going to be a big mistake for them going against Trump in 2020.
And Gabbard has some quirks. There's no doubt about it. The Assad stuff is very strange. Her back history is, she violates all sorts of liberal, acceptable policies in her history. But there's a world where Tulsi Gabbard is a dream candidate for the Democrats. A person who served in the military, who's friendly to the camera, who's young, who's not white, God forbid, who's not a man. All these amazing things, plus military service would be a great formula. I don't know if that happens.
In the days of Mondale Ferraro, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Geraldine Ferraro, but she was a vice president, the first woman vice presidential candidate, blah, blah, blah. She could have won. I mean, she is more than a dream candidate for the Democratic Party of even Clinton era.
Because she's also serious. Like, the thing about Gabbard is, like, she is a serious person. You see it on stage. You see people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Biden, like, they're talking in these sort of like cliches, and it feels like you're watching politics. With her, it feels like you're watching like a Secretary of Defense, which very well might be what she's going for in a Biden administration. And I remind people of this all the time because I think it's one of the weirdest quirks of this entire election cycle. Tulsi Gabbard was vetted for a role inside the Trump administration. In the Trump administration, she's an odd bird as a candidate. And I do think that I feel like VP, she might be too much of an odd bird for Biden, but like Secretary of Defense or one of those high-end foreign policy roles, maybe even state, she would be a legitimate possibility there. And I think that's kind of where she's thinking right now. That's why you see her as so defensive of Biden and so much you see attacking people like Harris. I think she's found her little niche here. And she's an interesting candidate. I mean, she's always going to be one of the highest Googled people after these debates because people are like, who is this person? I mean, she stands out.
And not in a Marianne Williamson sort of way.
Yeah, which I didn't see her on that poll.
I'm very worried about your girl. She's getting a lot of zeros and ones in these polls. I don't know if she's going to be in the next debates.
Darn it.
It's all computers recognize those zeros and ones.
That's true.
So that's good.
That's true. That's true.
She's winning.
Glenn, big announcement today.
Yeah, we're going to be in Salt Lake City on December 7th. I'm doing one show only, Kingsbury Hall of Christmas Stories. This is a lot of laughs, no politics. If you're a Blaze subscriber, you get them first. They go on sale for the public on Friday. Go to glennbeck.com. Use Blaze Media as the code.